we are the Lagos group and we'll be presenting our findings today. Lagos, Nigeria sits in the crook of Africa. In the country, obviously, of Nigeria, its populace lives in many varying climates across the actual country. However, we're going to focus in on the state of Lagos itself. In the state, education is actually pretty important to the people, and a lot of the people do go to primary and secondary school in a way to hopefully better the community itself. And they house many colleges as well. Yet the coastal nation lives and thrives on its symbiosis between the water. However, it's also its biggest controlling factor as well. The infrastructure is impacted by it as it goes. Floods often take out the roads and cause large-scale traffic and damage to everything, as well as flooding and will move all the sanitation issues all over the state. For today, we're going to focus on two locations in Lagos itself. We're going to focus on the Cocoa as a case study, and then focus our attention down further south onto Lagado Island and how to further expand it as people arrive.
Okay, this is just an introduction to the arrival city concept and is showing the migration from many outlying villages into the city center of Lagos.
Alright, for mapping. To begin with our research, we were focused on the data presented in the city and the surrounding lands. To really begin with, we focused on identifying and mapping the lower class and impromptu building locations, as is where the arrivals will go and settle in the area. From that, it was to focus on building slope. However, this was not a big problem, as the majority of the area has a slope of less than 6 degrees of increase, with very few areas getting over that, and even then not any more than 10 degrees. We also looked at the quality of the land as well. The soils are all shifting and flooding relentlessly. Though good for farming in some areas, the sands along the shore below and dune up, and this causes the soils but the soils to the north are solid and rich in clay and very dry, though are very prone to shifting due to rain, which happens quite frequently in this area. The remaining soils are the east and west of the mainland. As the soils and the water go to show in this area, the settlements are often unstable at best, and this also demonstrates how even in the best areas, the road quality is deplorable at the very best. The lagoon area, shown on the right of this area, controls over the city and many of its inhabitants. As such, the lagoon is subject to tide and rain and the flow and ebb of the Obo and Uban River that populate the overflowing vitals in the lagoon. Flooding occurs as a resultant of these ebbs, as many people are impacted by the water, so is the pollution. The sanitation programs are found in Lagos, meaning its populace uses the water as the source of its waste disposal.
This is a mapping of the major transportation routes throughout the main part of the city. Our island is shown down there at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, and the 3 red dots around that are the major ports found in the area. The dashed lines represent the major bus routes. The large red dot that's seen in the middle is the main airport, and the 2 squares are the largest bus depots in the area. These are the water depots and the routes that they take. The water quality in the city is very overused and polluted, and they use 79 million meters cubed annually. The water supply from ground and surface sources is inadequate to meet the demand, so they have to pipe in more. For 85% of the households in the city have access, but only 12% of that's piped. 33% use public taps, 35% use hand pumps, 11% use ponds, 2% use wells, and 3% use other sources. And the distance to source water into the city is over 1 kilometer for 11% of the population and under 1 kilometer for 89%. And these show all the major depots from where it is sourced in. down to mainly this area, which is the middle of Victoria Island.
So as shown in red, these are the largest informal housing villages or the slum areas. The two largest are the Alice Olson and Makoko. Alice Olson is in the middle of a trash dump, and many people make a living digging through the trash and flipping it for money. It's expanding because of its convenience. And Makoko, which we'll talk about soon, in this area, it's the largest slum area, and it hasn't been expanding so much. People are living in houses built on stilts so they can expand over to the water. So these are the four main landfills for the city. They're located near expressways and are popular for people who can actually afford to drop off their garbage. So the furthest landfill, this one up here, it's about 15 miles away from the center of the city, and the closest one is about 10 miles. So for people that rely on walking everywhere, it's very inconvenient to go there. So illegal dumping is their solution, and polluting the ground, and they also pollute the water.
Alright, this is just a close-up showing how the area of Makoko has a large informal housing area, with this entire area taken up by just ragtag little houses that are barely put together at best. And because of its location close to the lagoon and the rivers, these areas are all flooded out annually and have to be reconstructed, meaning that none of the housing is very permanent or well built, and because it has to be rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt upon the basically the destruction of the last set.
So when we are looking at the slum areas throughout Lagos and the rapid growth of the city and new arrivals coming to the city, there becomes this phenomenon where the new arrival population tends to settle into the neglected or less desirable spaces. So you can see along the major roadways there's more formal housing, and then the informal housing or slums tend to be more randomized and populate those areas that are in the gaps. And we as a group have been looking at this and considering it as a form of sedimentation, so a falling into the low spots and kind of filling in the areas that are less desirable by the rest of the community. It's also places where they can build that they don't have to pay for or pay very little for. And in this second image, this is a garbage dump site, which is at the head of this waterway. And then all along the waterway, you have these little shacks built up, informal housing. So when it floods, that trash and the floodwater washes through and really wreaks havoc on those locations. So as the city expands, and as the government is pressing for more real estate and pushing the inhabitants out of the slums, then the new arrivals are going to look for where those less dense places are, where they can settle, and we'll explain how that led to the location that we picked for our study.
Because of the mass population increase on the mainland, in order to do any sort of expansion program, we had to look for an area that was less dense, which led us to this island. We dug Alado Island based off the name of one of the major cities here. It has a lot more open ground than any other areas in Lagos, but it still shows conditions open that are similar to Makoko and other areas, allowing us to still be able to take the information we found earlier, but project it on an area that where some good can actually be done to the area and isn't impacted too much by the massive amount of population and density such as Makoko has.
So now we're going to go from mapping to indexing, which is analyzing multiple and seeing what relates relationships arise from that that may be useful in determining proposals for intervention and also understanding what has been going on. The water and swamps particularly are the deciding factor with the way people have settled and the way they live. And the water washes away most of a lot of the buildable sites, as it's a very shallow slope topography. And while the water dictates where the buildings reside, it also tends to be a means of kind of shaping where people inhabit because of access to certain resources and to certain paths to connect to other areas of the city. And then the way that the people move throughout the island, we'll look at in a bit, that shapes, again, where new people that come settle, because people start forming main routes and main centers, and it becomes easier for people to live off those areas because the resources are there. So the people that are of higher social class or have more wealth, they can afford to live elsewhere. And we'll look at that. And the final thing is how the access to the island, and particularly access to docks and a route that seems to be the main avenue for people to come from the mainland to this island, which we call a ferry access. And that seems to be a critical deciding factor in the inhabitation and pattern of settlement.
To start off with where everything is controlled by, as we had said earlier, flooding plays a major role in this case. As such, we took the average across the entirety of recorded data for the state itself and put it down here, in which case the average was about 3 feet at max. However, in other locations on the state itself, it can reach up to 6-7 feet at a time. As you can see here, these are the locations that would flood should water level raise up to that 3-foot mark. Everything that is in between the mountain and gray lines would be underwater, and as such would be unbuildable or unwise to build in case of flooding.
So let me get this in, can you go back one? So the outline in bright white is the outline of the island, correct? And then the dark gray is where it might be flooding?
The dark gray is where the water would rise to based on the topography should the flood occur.
Alright, this graph here shows where water that lands upon the island would naturally run into. Each of the areas in here is a pooling area that would hold up to 3 feet of water. The white lines show 1 foot, whereas the canoe now shows 1 foot of rise each time. This shows how the water that drops onto the land, some of it does run off into the rivers surrounding it, but a large majority pools onto the land, some of which sit on the major populaces and can cause a lot of standing water in these areas, because it goes back to the idea of how they don't have a drainage system. And so this would sit with all the trash and create a very toxic environment for the people living there.
So these are the flows on the island. They're all starting from this main dock over here, which is the main access point to the island. So here we're starting at the main dock, and people tend to take the shortest route possible when it comes to moving around in here. There's a market up in the front, so that's the most popular area, and it's expanding some more space down here. Here's one of the more popular areas on the northeast point, and there are many docks all along the shore, along with a lot of canoes and personal transportation for people to go to the mainland.
How were those flow lines derived?
They're derived from well, there's no roads. There's dirt roads pads that we traced over. They aren't showing up in this diagram
These
right
are
now.
done by hand, not done computational.
No, it is computational, but yeah, the grid or the pads that they're not showing up right now.
The part that was done by hand was taken from zooming in on Google Earth and actually getting it to see what they dictated as a map.
And here's another view of the southern area. We picked the point of interest for just an open space, as well as this path down here where you can go across to another island that'll lead you towards the coast by the ocean. And one last popular area is on the west side, which is slowly expanding.
So this is a map indicating the population in 2000, and the following slides will show the growth of the island and the different sectors over the next 6 to 12 years. So then this is the area of developed area in 2006, and the next one, and then in 2013. So from this historical satellite imagery, we can look at, rather than run off an estimated population, we can have an exact measured developed area and determine the percentage of developed area and rate of expansion from that. So these are the numbers for the particular regions right here, and this main one, which is the initial location of settlement, is the largest growth, and that's also the point of arrival that we've determined, which makes sense why it would be larger growing. And you can see the figures for the amount of square miles of growth for each 6-year period that was indexed here.
So is that in aggregate, that 10.8% is from
The-
2000 to 2013?
The 10.8% is a taken, so that was, I took the total for that region for the 6 years and divided by 6. And that's where the number came from, so it's the average annual.
Okay, so we went into specifically looking for what types of construction. So based on the lack of information on this island, so we pretty much can sort of see what type of construction the houses are by just looking down on the roof, the types, like what material, what color, what like size of the building. So we pretty much divided construction into 4 types. One is the thatched roof, which is really old with like strips or wood on top of the roof. And then the second one is the tin or metal, which symbolizes the growth and the expansion of houses along with people coming into the island. And then the third one is the kind of like the major buildings like schools or market, those bigger buildings. And then another one is the buildings under construction there, which are along the way expanding. So on this map, well, it's not really clear at all. On this map is so this color shows the thatched roof. So which you can see these are minor straight and major straight. So you can see on that top corner, which is really extremely dense and occupied by many like thatched roofs, which also tells us that could be the first area where people come from and they adapted. And then also you can see like the relation. So also this color is the metal. So the newer houses with better material like metal roof or more tin material, copper, like whatever roofs. So which you can see there are extremely like rapidly expanding growth. So just by looking at this coastal strait, and then you can see that, you can see a lot of buildings like away from the strait, so which means like people are moving from the coast, like from the center or from the coast along the way, expanding out, or they're going into the center to get rid of the coast. And just by the size of the numbers of the houses, you can see that those really old thatch roof houses are decreasing. So they're getting rid of those houses and then making those like metal houses. So which also symbolizes the development and their advancement of like living standard. And then one more thing is that you can sort of see there's a little bit hierarchy in it. So people tend to move further away and get rid of those people who are living in like really old thatch roofs. So you can still see there's a gap between like people who come to this island earlier or late. So symbolizes how long they've been adapting this island.
So this is another image. The last one was particularly looking at the connection to the roads and connectivity of the different construction types. This indexing or meshing is taking into account mainly just looking at the construction type percentage per area per region and the total, and relating that to the total building area by region. And from this data, before I get into it, we can derive a few items. We can see that there is a social hierarchy within the society. We can see where the tendency is for the different hierarchical groups to settle, and that may be an indicator of based on the last ones, the connectivity and access to resources and the time that an area has been established, which would indicate that they have developed techniques that are common and they build upon that. And we can see that by looking at patterns that have been developed. We see groups of houses of a nicer, more modern construction type. And we see that in edge conditions along major routes as well, which that might be because that's more prime real estate. And particularly looking at the different regions and what the predominant construction types are. Two that have particular note are in this corner, which has a very large part of older metal roofing. The thatched roofing, from the satellite imagery, it's hard to differentiate from a rusted metal roof, but we figured that a really old rusted metal roof and thatched roof would fit into a similar hierarchical position because they don't have the resources to modernize their roof or renew it. And then over on this side, it has a very large part of it that is this one has a large part of thatch roof, and this side has a very high percentage of the metal roof. And it seems like over here, based on the satellite imagery, there's more industry around here, which that might be why, is the people have better jobs, or higher paying jobs. And then, as makes sense, around the perimeter of the cities is where the more development is. So the dark blue represents the under construction, and light blue is the newer metal roofs or public buildings that are nicer. I say nicer, I mean they're better developed, better planned. And the northeast has the highest percentage of building square footage of all the different locations. So when we see that this has the highest percentage of thatched roof per population, and it also has the most inhabitants. That might be an indicator that that is where the people that don't have as much means go to live. And that might be because of the access to docks. When you look at the number of docks that are along here and the proximity of each of the houses to the docks, the people really live off fishing and as a main means of food. So those are some of the conclusions we can draw from construction type.
So in landscape urbanism, meshing is the phase that interpolates the data we presented prior in this presentation. The mesh is presented as an overlay of our 3 major indexes. To begin with, we base the location of the settlements to a scale distance from the river, as you saw before. So everything, the coloring in the houses isn't really showing up, but the everything that's within 500 or more feet is in green. 250 to 500 feet away from the edge is in yellow, and 250 feet is red. So the gradation of the coloring represents the risk of being washed out as a distance from the river. The floodplain is laid on top, showing locations to flood based on topography. And each layer is presented as a 1-foot raise. As the water washes upon the buildings, we can judge the suitable building possibilities. So as we can see, the villages have done well to avoid the possible flooding spots, because Lagos gets washed up multiple times throughout the years. However, it's not just the water from the river that becomes a worry, but also the movement of nature's fervent rains, that pond and pool on the site that inform the mesh. The overlay of these 3 data create a formation of lands where it's proper to build. So another mesh we threw on top involves the population and movement of people, the connections to other villages on the island. And this indicates and shows that people move from the historical older parts out. They also show the center of traffic on the island.
Okay, so the proposed zone, so which we, as after all this indexing and meshing, so we came up with the proposed zone, which is, the zone is to be built, lies between Central Bar and the northern town Alado. So the zone is bounded into southeast by Raffia and Morov swamps and provides water food, but they don't have unstable ground for construction.
Where is that?
This, right,
Yeah.
we were talking about right here. It's bounded south by swamp and then north by the river.
There remain zones that are unbuilt due to the coming of water and the risking floods. It over time as the villages fill in as a sediment to the city. So the sediment fill the ponding and the floods, and hopefully reduce their impact as time advances. The proposal includes the creation and connections of to the surrounding villages, and then the means of continuing on the layers on construction topologies that are already present on the island.
Thus far, our group has progressed to the final mesh and a possible solution as to how to move forward to prototyping the arrival zone and the creation of a thriving culture and sanitary living conditions. The continuation of the current housing construction will create a familiar living environment and allow new arrivals control over the construction of their own homes. By connecting the new town center to the ferry and water, we can improve traffic and hopefully provide a safe transit path that runs little to no risk of flooding, as well as the creation of safe public spaces with the intention of creating a market space on the island that is connected to all of the major population areas. The flooding lands and soil type allow for the farming of rice in a controlled manner, which provides food and resources for the surrounding communities. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, well, each one of these layers here represents our layering of the indexes to create basically a micro mesh. The bottom layer would be our flooding and pooling of water. The Next one up would be housing density and type to the flows. The next one up is
Construction type.
and then the final layer on the top layer is our proposed zone for building, and it is housed in by the red pins, and as we look down, you can see the overlay.
They are removable too.
Just
So
not
it's a
very
little-
safe right
yeah,
now.
it's-
So if the panel would like, we can remove each of the layers once you do individually.
What I'm hearing you saying is that you built up from the bottom, and then the top is the result of that.
Yes.
Is all that?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of things that I want to kind of pop off a little bit. I'm very intrigued about the project and the process and the way you talked about it. However, there's this a really large disconnect between what you're saying and what you're showing on the boards, to the point where I'm pretty much lost through the whole presentation because you're not indicating, you're telling us, not showing us a lot of this information. And what you are showing is actually seems so restricted by an aesthetic that it actually starts to be so spare that it actually doesn't convey what you're saying. So like the flood zone, if you go to the flood zone one, you know, there's just 100 of gray lines. So it doesn't tell me where should I start to connect these zones, right? I don't, and if you go back to your very beginning, you know, I have a hard time understanding what's water, what's land, you know, in terms of, keep going. You're made, yeah, like these here, it's like, okay, what's water, what's land, where is this stuff? So to me, I mean, I appreciate you trying to kind of create this cohesive look, right, of how to convey information, but you're doing it at the expense of actually conveying the information in a efficient manner. Because, so what I have to do is, I'm forced to sit here and disentangle what I'm saying, and I'm losing snippets of what you're saying because they're not jiving. It's not very clear. I can't get into it. So I think that's one of the first things that I would, when you prepare your final presentation, you know, really think about honing in and making these things super clear. Okay, and then all of the statistics and everything. Those should be popping up all the time. You spend way too much time on every single slide. You know, show us, don't tell us all of these statistics. Show us where the water's coming from. Show us the percentage. You know, just get into that and do more in terms of showing us. Okay, because I believe in the process that you've developed. I mean, I believe that what you've done and the way you've analyzed it can lead to good conclusions, but I haven't been able to piece it all together where I can feel comfortable saying, yeah, what you arrived at the top is the appropriate solution. Okay, does that make sense?
And I'll just reinforce that because I think all of those are great points. If you're saying something, I need to see it. You've got to challenge yourself because you've done a lot of work, but it's disconnected, as Darren said, between what you were telling us and what was showing on up there. You've got to sit down before you present and make sure what I'm saying is going to also show on it. So you can't just kind of get in with the blinders on, and I know that happens. It's like, I know it, therefore it's going to come across that. You've got to really be brutal on yourself. Is what I'm saying showing up in the way that I need it to show? I'll take it even a step further. I think it's a little abstract for me coming in from the outside. I'd like to see a picture of something. You know, literally, I'd like to get a sense of the feel of the urban fabric and the physical conditions. And I think that can really set the stage to reinforce then when you come up to your planning recommendations, I'm making that connection. So I don't think that there's any harm in saying, you know, look, here's kind of a little virtual tour. And then when you got down to the island, I was dying to see something about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the comments that have been made. I think it's really tough what you're trying to do, so I can appreciate the difficulty of the task. Anytime you're doing a project like this and you're calling it mapping, for the purposes of trying to generate a design, what you're trying to do is map out or spatialize the data geographically. And so the comment about needing to see what you're saying, I think is really important in terms of needing to see it in a way that you want us to see it, which is mapping relationships. So I think you're trying to do that, so you're off to a good start on that. But the actual graphic needs to be done in a way so that what you can take away from what you see is a spatial relationship. So I think that's, I just want to reiterate that point. I think that would be really helpful if you could, I don't know what we would call it, scrub the slides, so you can kind of eliminate extraneous information. Just kind of go back through and edit out certain things that aren't working. That would probably help you quite a bit. There's so much about what you did that I was taking a lot of notes because it's so much of it's really interesting, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to talk about all of the really interesting things you're doing. So, it's a shame we don't have more time. But one thing I think that would help you at this stage that you could do to kind of refine this presentation rather than create a different presentation is something that's called, in research methods sort of jargon, it's called purpose skewing, which means show the evidence and then show your interpretation of the evidence. So if you're getting information from Google Earth and you're looking down and this is where you're getting your data and it's based on that, give us a snippet of that and show us that, okay, here's the data, here's how we interpret it, and it's just a snippet of all the work we've done to arrive at this larger map. That way you get us sort of either on your side and agreeing with you, or helping you to do a better job at interpreting the data, translating the data, coding the data. So then we could chat about what is it to code data, which means what is it that you're taking from this image or this demographic or statistic, and what are you doing with it on here as a representation of that? That would be a method of representing it, and then what value do you assign to this? I mean, is this something that's you're saying is on a scale of 1 to 5, the highest priority or the lowest priority kind of information? And that would be your coding. You're going to ask something?
I was going to say, so that's kind of like anticipating the questions and trying to make it so you're not having to ask, where did we get that, or what is that based on?
It's anticipating the questions, but beyond that, it's
Showing us the process.
Yeah, it's in a sense, you're showing your insights. It's two different ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is you're making a presentation and you're being evaluated on how good you're doing the presentation. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is this is really cool information, and we want to think with you and help you think more about it. And unless we have that kind of backstory of the information and how you arrived at this graphic, then it's hard for us to kind of help, because we don't really understand exactly what the connections are between the data that you had and what you're showing. I could say, well, it looks like a cool map, but I'm not quite sure I can even say whether or not I agree with its accuracy or not, right? And if I can't do that, then I have no chance of helping you. Aside to say, come on, I like the color she picked, which that's a different kind of help, which is helpful, but different kind of help. Then the other thing I'll just leave you with is the idea of you don't want to leverage the presentation with things that aren't supported by the presentation. So you don't want to make statements that leverage what you're presenting to bear the burden of having to prove